Hello, everyone. To those just tuning in, welcome. To those who've been checking out sessions throughout the day, welcome back. We hope you're enjoying the content and looking forward to more awesome presentations coming up. A big thank you to our partners and speakers for helping us deliver a fantastic program. A quick reminder to join our Slack channel to interact with other attendees and join selected speakers for Q&A. You can find the link in the menu at the top of this page. Happy viewing.
Hey everyone, my name is Anthony Cardone, and I'm here with Corey to discuss the unspoken value of building internal products. I'm a technical program manager at Grubhub, where I focus on engineering productivity and efficiency. Before that, I was a TPM at Shutterstock, where I had the privilege of working with Corey and got to work on a bunch of internal and external customer-facing products. Corey here is the Director of Product for Internal Tools at Chief, a private network and community for executive-level women. For those of you not yet familiar with Chief, you likely will be soon and probably know somebody who's already a member. Chief started in February of 2019. It's exclusive to women in power, usually VP level and up, with over 2,000 members and another 5,000 plus on the waitlist. They have 2 locations in New York City and are expanding into LA and Chicago in the summer of 2020. Now, Corey didn't start his career in product. He began in wealth planning and would later transition into product management. He's held a few roles before landing on internal products. Over at MakerBot, he worked in web e-commerce and community. He moderated a passionate global community of open source makers while managing 2 engineering teams that built out the MakerBot e-commerce site. At Shutterstock, he led product for enterprise e-commerce, where about 50% of their work was internal. He was the product lead for a 450-person sales org whose goal was to scale Shutterstock's B2C market to enterprise customers. And now, as I mentioned, he's the Director of Internal Products at Chief, where the focus has been growing a traditionally in-person, high-touch business using technology and services. He's also responsible for scaling those services as Chief expands into new markets. So, for internal product people want to build great stuff. We're in a time where so many companies are building out their digital presence and relying on technology to improve customer experience. But what about those who are behind the scenes? How do they leverage technologies to better the efforts and drive towards a shared company vision? How do all those processes behind the curtain scale up so that the customer-facing element impacts a wider audience, or perhaps a specifically targeted demographic? At many companies, there are teams of individuals tasked with solving these problems, and today I'm joined by one of them. So, Corey, you noted that you began your career in finance and then moved into product. How did you land on working on products for internal teams and stakeholders?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. It's great talking with you again. I've always had a very inquisitive mind and the desire to just solve problems. I actually went to school originally for graphic design, but at the time there was no major for graphic design when I was at Ohio State. So I decided to fall back and do something else that I loved, which was finance. So the firm that I started at was a very small firm, about 150 to 200 employees. And the New York office was just under 10. So naturally, at that role, and one of the youngest there, I was tasked with doing a lot of different things and wearing a lot of different hats. One of the things I was focused on was sending quarterly reports to our clients. And this was something that we did for about 80 to 100 clients every quarter. But it involved manually creating and sending out these reports, which was a large part of the time. So one of the things that I focused on was a way to make this a little bit easier for our advisors and, of course, for myself. At the time, we were also one of the first companies around that we were working on to do Salesforce for financial based purposes. So I saw an opportunity to use Salesforce to automatically send out some of these reports to our clients instead of having to manually do it. And I instituted a process in order to get that done. So it's kind of funny that going back, all the way back to my financial days, working with Salesforce and getting automation was one of the first things that I did. And I was able to get a huge percentage of my day back very quickly. But all this was done before I even really knew what product management was. It wasn't until I was truly working on product at enterprise at Shutterstock that I was really able to see what the value of building products for internal teams would bring. So the enterprise business at Shutterstock, like you said, had a 400-person global sales org, and that was my biggest stakeholder. And if you've built products for a sales team before, you very much understand what I mean when I say it was a challenge. Since enterprise clients' business are so much different, more different across each vertical, there was an entirely different set and suite of products that we needed to create just for them. At Shutterstock, there were whole teams dedicated for people manually doing tasks just to keep the business afloat and to work with their customers. One of the biggest areas we found that was an issue was the opportunity to license content in bulk. So traditionally, if you're a retail user and you're on a site, there was a need, you go and search for it, you decide what you want, you purchase it, and then you consume that content. But for news and media, it's a little different. If you're familiar with how we get news and things, you want it immediately. You want it quick. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be in your face. So we look to Twitter and CNN and any other websites to get that very quickly. But how does that content get there so fast? News and media businesses need to get the content faster than that traditional retail flow where they're just going on and searching, purchasing, and bringing it onto the site. They need it now, they need it quick, and they need to worry about the business aspect of it later. So the enterprise model enabled businesses to operate this way, but we still lived in this world where you had to put something in a cart and then check out, and this wouldn't work for those businesses. So we saw a need to allow businesses to process a large number of assets in a very short period of time that would fit with their business model. So what we did is we created a new tool to allow that. And we went from the normal cart method to being able to process thousands of images within a couple of minutes. And I knew after seeing what it did for the 25 or so people on that team, when they no longer had to process these things manually for their clients anymore, that we were doing something big, and it was really exciting.
See, I know firsthand from my time working with you there that the manual processes you described were painful to watch. I had heard sales managers at the time complain about their team spending so much time doing admin work, they were losing out on commission opportunities, and it was just hurting morale. The measurable benefits that came from your automations actually built the business case for the next waves of internal products we use at Shutterstock. So let me ask you, how do you describe the main differences between external products and internal ones? Could you give me an example of some customer-facing product that had a large internal element to it?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest differences is the actual goal of the product that you're creating. So many times for external facing products, there can be many different KPIs used to measure success. Conversion rates, unique page views, maybe monthly, weekly, daily active users, returning users, et cetera. In some ways, it's actually easier to have a lot of options to measure success, but can also be more challenging. What is the right combination of those KPIs in order to measure what is a successful member, what is a successful transaction? You need to figure out the right way to get to that complete picture. Sometimes it's very straightforward, maybe a membership model where you're looking for a renewal rate, or maybe it's a little more art than science, figuring out that right blend. So for internal tools, it's actually a little bit different. I look at it as two main areas to focus on. The first one is creating efficiency for an existing process. And the second way is how do we create tools to expand and grow those existing processes. So for the first one, how can we implement a process or service that allows our internal users to do their job better? There's some of the most widely known internal products out there. The one that comes to mind for me is the Ford assembly line. So Ford created a way for his workers to be able to be more efficient in assembling cars to get to the end goal, which is to sell people cars. And the more cars that he could put out there into the public, the more obviously money that they could make for the company. So using operational logistics and automation, the Ford Motor Company was able to assemble a Model T in about 90 minutes using this process, where prior it would take about 12 hours. So by creating that efficiency, they were able to get many times more vehicles into the public's hands and then therefore increase overall growth of the company. Now for the second one, improving the process that exists, I look to one that's actually very relevant right now, given where we are, and I look to Peloton. So this is a business that took a concept of exercising in a studio that had existed for a long time and bringing it into your home and bringing that experience into everyone's living room. And when most people think of Peloton, they think of the bike or the tread, right? The thing that you're doing, the action. But start to think about what's happening in the background. How do all of these teams actually get that content to you? There's the production and editing software that's used to film and compress the files and get them to you. But also the result of that is a very easy, super intuitive application where you're able to get everything. This is the real win, I think, with Peloton from an internal tool standpoint, is how do we get that content? And like, what is the thing we're actually using to consume it?
You know, I really like that example because I never really thought of Peloton as a CMS. But in reality, that's what we're talking about. Because like you said, otherwise it's just a bike. And I don't know if you follow the business trends, but Peloton just released some amazing quarterly results. So it is absolutely working. But how do you visualize the relationship between public facing and internal products?
Yeah, this question happens all the time. I think about it as a very well-known analogy, but the iceberg. So the external facing product is the tip of the iceberg, the thing that most people can see and are familiar with. It's above the water, it's visible. If I asked everyone to draw what an iceberg looks like right now, they'd most likely draw that wave line with a white cap coming out of the top. So again, it's just the most familiar and visible aspect of a product. For internal stuff, this is everything that's below the water. What most people don't see, but it's very, very much there. Sometimes it's massive and even bigger than what's above the surface, and sometimes it's not, and they're very equal. The important thing is that they are connected and that they're there together to create a thing. So many times we see this with digital products that have a very large in-person production, both behind the scenes or services with many different types of offerings. So the latter is, businesses with many different arms that continue to grow the overall end user product.
Interesting. Do you find that you're able to apply those same product management principles to your work?
It's definitely possible, but a different challenge. I've been at a few companies where everyone does a version of Agile and iterative development. And in many ways, it maps over from the external to the internal product. But one of the biggest areas I see a difference is the definition of MVP. Many PMs want to get to a very lean MVP place, get it out the door, test it, use data to make decisions, iterate accordingly, and then do it all again. This doesn't always work when building tools for internal users to do their jobs with. So in my experience, I've seen it go both ways, where I've shipped a very, very lean MVP out the door, let the team use it, break it, address some bugs, and iterate again. And the result has been unusability, which quickly led to low adoption because the person was unable to do their job. However, conversely, if you go the waterfall method, we know that some of the normal risks come out, right? You're sacrificing speed to market, possibly. You risk changing environments and requirements, and just general delays that will naturally push out a launch. So for example, if we're thinking about this practically, you have someone who is working manually on processing payments for customers. And the task that you have in front of you is to build a tool or process to automate on their behalf. So how would you define that MVP? One way is to define very lean and new payments is the only thing we're going to process. That's our MVP to make sure it gets out there and it does what we need. But this person could be processing payments from new payments, refunds, renewals, installment payments, split method. So sure, you could launch an MVP for new payments only, have all the training in the world, launch it on time, no bugs, and it works for new payments. But the first time a partial refund or something else comes into play, that person is no longer going to be able to do their job and going to have a problem. So we've now added a step in their process. And possibly if tasked with that scenario again, maybe they just default to using the old system, again, leading to low adoption. So I'm not advocating necessarily one versus the other. I think that internal tools really benefit from being able to have a hybrid. So essentially, you have to understand when to use either method. I think being flexible enough to make the switch, to go from one to the other, or to adapt is where you're going to find success in applying these principles for internal tools.
And that makes sense to me. From the internal products I've used, when I think of building something that's public facing, I think about an MVP where you solve one single core problem in a novel situation, and then you just expand it accordingly with some new features and you grow out your user base. When we're dealing with internal products, you're usually trying to address a problem that already has a slow or inefficient or difficult solution in place that employees are using, and they can't easily just change tools. So if you want to succeed, you have to replace the collection of tools, the collection of practices. You have to improve the whole process, not just one piece, which is a challenge because that's a lot more development than you want to do when you're testing out this idea. But Moving forward, many people who are new to the product career make the switch for the opportunity to build really cool things. And they see their work, well, they want to see their work in the wild. Do you find hiring for internal facing roles more difficult?
Yeah, so there are definitely pros and cons to working in any role. Having been on both sides of it, now I can definitely see that. And I would say that it's not as though you're not building cool things that no one ever sees or that have little impact. You're just building for a different audience, I think is the key. So for me, I am able to get immediate response from the teams that we build for, which is awesome. The goal is to implement something that makes their work easier. And if you do it well, they tell you about it. Also, if you do it badly, they will tell you about it. But building for something that increases revenue and you can see direct results is very, very satisfying. The people that I find are most successful in working for internal tools side of the business are people who just love to solve problems, enjoy working with their teammates, and continue to build upon previous features. I usually see it in the interview questions when I'm chatting with product managers. And usually they answer the question of, tell me an example of, and they go right to a process that they solved or something that was broken that they fixed. Usually very telling that that's where their mind goes first in garnering success and what they find fulfilling. So that's kind of how I see how people are going to fare. But honestly, it's just all about passion, which is what you're looking for in any PM. And if they go to that place with a positive memory, then you know you're looking in the right spot.
That brings back a good memory. So if you don't mind me telling you an example, many years ago, I was managing an engineering team. I had a newer engineer. We built a new web form for internal use only, just to navigate, to basically search for different offices that were getting upgraded and make changes. And we were going to have admins around the country using this tool every single day. And the first search, really bad, like 6, 8, 10 seconds per search. And I went to the engineer and I'm like, this is just too slow. And he goes, yeah, it's only a few seconds though. It's not that big of a deal. And so had a little fun. I went back and I started mulling it over and said, how many people are going to use this in a day? How many times they go run the search? And how long is this tool going to be in effect? And I multiplied it all out and realized it was a few human lifetimes of use. So I came back to him and said, help me save a life. And I outlined it all out. And a few hours later, he got the time down to less than half and he saved a life. And it changed his view on how he did these projects in the future.
That's awesome. That's so funny when you relate it to something like that.
It was the last time I could ever use that line, but man, did it work at the time.
Impactful.
You mentioned that many times your work may follow a business process that's already in place. Is it possible for internal products to lead growth at a company?
Yeah. So I think it's a fairly common assumption that if your role is to make inefficient processes more efficient through automation and services, that the processes were there in the first place. And this is true, but not always true. I feel like many PMs have experienced working with the sales team where they may sell something to a feature, sell a feature to a client that may not necessarily exist yet, and then all of a sudden it appears on your roadmap because it's now a company priority. So it's no different for internal products, and it definitely happens. I think where product can lead the growth conversation is through enhancements to the original process that was already in place. So product people are naturally inquisitive and curious, constantly questioning the why. And during requirements gathering and scoping is where I find the best opportunity to really drive things forward and lead the conversation from an internal standpoint. It's a really great opportunity to find areas for improvement and just highlight some of the ways we might do something differently during development that maybe not everyone had thought of. It also gives you an understanding of the problems that the company is going through, and you can start to derive a roadmap leading that direction and then possibly pull that way as well. So I definitely think leveraging those existing processes is a good thing, but there's plenty of areas for our work as the internal side to kind of move things forward in ways that maybe not have been or haven't already been thought of.
That's awesome. But what gets you excited about the value that your work brings?
So for me, I had said that I went to school for graphic design and then started my career in finance. I was just always very interested in business as a whole and building things and watching businesses grow. And for me, I look at building the internal tools as a way to help build the company, not necessarily just a product. So many of the things that my teams work on span multiple departments, are extremely cross-team dependent, and tend to cross many different parts of the business and not in a way that maybe not every PM gets to experience. So for the work that we're doing, we're enabling teams to be successful, and in turn, the business then grows. At Chief, so much of our business is high touch and extremely curated. And I get the ability and the opportunity to build products that support that entire business. And that's extremely exciting, especially coming from an area where I was always watching how businesses grow. And now I'm in a position where I'm able to directly influence that. Is really just a fulfilling moment for a product manager. I also love seeing the people that we work with get excited for the value we bring, right? You always want to see a great response to anything that you ship. But in this case, you're making somebody's day better. Whether it's a hot fix in the short term or a new process that automates something for the long term, there is something extremely gratifying about being able to do your job well and help somebody else in the process. I'm not saying that this doesn't happen with most products, it most definitely does. But you're always going to have a natural connection to the people that you work with and your teammates. And I don't think that's something that you necessarily get with all external facing roles. So for me, that is one of the biggest highlights, is being able to help people and to see them being excited to do their work. It just makes everything we do that much more worth it.
That's just awesome, Corey. This has been great. I think we're about at end time, but I want to say thank you for taking the time out to chat with me today. It's really great to see you again. I've been at companies that range from 30 coworkers to 30,000, and I found that these kinds of internal products and solutions are necessary at all levels of the company. As we go more digital as a world, everything needs to be more scalable. And at the rate Chief is growing, these decisions you're making now are going to enable growth for years to come.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I appreciate it. Love talking with you as always, and I'm glad we're able to do this.
Keep in touch. Be well, man.
Thanks.